I'm Matt Dixon with Purple Patch Fitness, the founder and the head coach. Try and help people perform in life, but also bring a little bit of life to their athletics. And you are listening to the Physical Performance Show.
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, proudly brought to you by Polar's new generation running watches, the Polar Pacer and the Polar Pacer Pro, and our upcoming September next live stream event featuring positive sports psychologist Rory Darkins, cultivating deep well-being. I'm Brad Beer, sports and exercise physiotherapist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. Each week we'll bring you the latest and greatest information and inspiration designed to help you perform at your physical best. Of course, we do this across a range of our different episodes: interest editions, expert editions, coaches' corners, learnings catch-up episodes, and featured performer episodes. And on today's Coach's Corner episode, you are in for a real treat. I sat down recently with Matt Dixon, exercise physiologist, head coach and founder of Purple Patch Fitness, for a wide-reaching conversation around coaching principles. By way of bio, Matt Dixon is a world-class triathlon coach, former professional triathlete and elite swimmer, and an exercise physiologist. Under Matt's guidance, Purple Patch Fitness have recorded 350 professional Ironman and Ironman 70.3 victories and podiums, including multiple World Championships, including Australian and former guest of the show, Tim Reed's 70.3 Ironman World Championship title. Matt's distinct performance methodology focuses on integrating performance into time-starved life, which has made him highly sought after as a resource amongst the industry for years. Matt is the author of 2 books, The Well-Built Triathlete and Track Triathlete, and a regular contributor to sports magazines and publications, an Ironman U Master Coach, alongside some corporate speaking to major companies on performance and leadership. And during today's conversation, Matt touches on the Purple Patch pillars of performance, the concept of soul-filling sessions and why it's important, the difference between purpose and goal setting, the concept of the inner animal and the heads-up display, and Matt challenges us to be an assassin of truth for looking at where we are at now. There's a whole lot in this episode. I thoroughly enjoyed recording with Matt Dixon. Get your pen and paper ready. Here are some wonderful learnings from Purple Patch Fitness founder and head coach, Matt Dixon. Matt Dixon, Purple Patch Fitness, welcome to the Physical Performance Show. A real thrill to have you on for this episode.
I couldn't be happier to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Excited. Let's have some fun.
Matt, I mentioned before we press record that I've long known of your work and your contribution to the endurance sporting space, your coaching of elite athletes, your publications, your podcast, the Purple Patch Fitness podcast, Purple Patch. And then one of my most enjoyable reads in recent years in terms of a book or a publication was Christy Ashwinden's Good to Go, which we've featured Christy in the past on the show. It was a very popular episode. And I recall reading the book and your name just kept popping up, Matt Dixon. And that was great, I guess, to be included in the minds behind the pages of Good to Go.
It's a great book, and I guess I was a little bit of a go-to. I earned a tagline name or a nickname, whatever you might call it, of the recovery coach. So as it was focused around recovery, I think that she came to me first, it seems. But yeah, and we had a series of very, very good conversations. I have a lot of respect for her, and I thought the book and the publication was really insightful and interesting.
You yourself, Matt, you're a published author. Your most recent publication, which is, going back several years now, but still so applicable to much of this audience, is the Track Triathlete. balancing a big life with big performance in long course triathlon. I smile and I laugh because I think we both appreciate the type of personality drawn to that pursuit. They tend to be hard driving, performance oriented. As a starting point for this conversation, what was the purpose in publishing or putting together the Fast Track Triathlete?
Well, it's a great question, and the catalyst for it was really, firstly, I think I should start with the mission of Purple Patch and what we try and do. I mean, we actually have a very cute mission statement, which is to educate and empower all human beings to reach their athletic potential. And I should point out that's through the lens of, by meeting athletic potential, you reach life potential. The reason I start there is because I think my background, where I was an elite swimmer, I have my backbone of education in clinical physiology, and I went on to race triathlons, and I'm the archetype of a wonderful example of how to do a professional triathlon career poorly, where I took all of the stereotypes of the age-old triathlete, high obsession, great work ethic, great motivation, and I just drove myself into the ground. I had really bad supporting habits around sleep, recovery, nutrition. I ate plenty, but I've always been a bigger guy, trying to get lighter, etc., and basically drove myself into chronic fatigue. And this is now like late 90s, early 2000s, and I looked around and looked at the landscape of the sport, and I just saw a massive amount of underperformance, and particularly around people that had really busy lives outside of their sport, amateurs, time-starved people. And the common methodology was to take the practices of professional athletes and just kind of shrink it and pink it. Basically say, I can't do 30 hours, but I'm going to do 20. And so many people were highly dedicated, working their behinds off, getting really fit, but fatigued. And we started to have a lot of success, both at the professional level and the amateur level, of really looking at things from the other end of the equation, really promoting aspects that were supporting but critical, such as recovery, nutrition, strength and conditioning, and everything that falls under that, and putting it on a level playing field as the endurance component and getting really good results. So coming back to the mission, that's why I wrote the book, to really try and be helpful and to help shift the lens on what it means to create long-term performance. And most importantly, and I think it comes across in the book, performance not just in getting faster and achieving your goals. That's kind of the easy thing. But actually by going on that journey, amplifying your health, being able to show up in the workplace better, be able to be present for your family. And I think that's the bigger purpose, or at least should be the purpose for amateur athletes, to be honest.
You said something very powerful there at the start, which I certainly resonate with as a vocational sports physiotherapist, and that is when people meet their athletic potential, they meet their life potential.
Mm-hmm. We have a saying of performance within context of your life. And I think that one of the things that many athletes and coaches, I would say, fail to appreciate is that stresses in life accumulate. And so we can't look at training stress. And of course, stress is a good thing because a stressor on the body is the catalyst to create adaptations. But we can't look at that within a vacuum. We have to look at within the context of all of the other stressors that we as really busy human beings have to absorb, manage, and navigate. And it can come from family, it can come from work, it can come from travel, it can come from financial. Make it up. It's that big thing called life. And what we're doing as amateur athletes is integrating an additional stressor. So we have to think about it holistically, but also hopefully supporting that stressor with a whole bunch of positive eustresses, really good quality sleep, a smart backbone of nutrition, a little bit of downtime to decompress and be with your family and get the bigger picture. And the interesting thing is when athletes get that recipe right, they fundamentally are healthy, and they need to see people like you less, at least in the context of trying to fix things. And they can break, hopefully, the injury cycles, or at least minimize that. And they are able to create this magic word in sports performance, which is consistency. And if you can create consistency over many weeks, many months, even many years, performance tends to flourish. But on top of it, then you end up building capacity to navigate the stressful situations, because the proverbial poop hits the fan always in life. It's not meant to be easy, but we build capacity as human beings. And so I also think there's a really important point here, because people always look at runners or cyclists or triathletes and they think they're taking something and doing more on their life. But in fact, if you do it right and you really integrate it, by going on that journey and everything around the endurance sports journey, which includes strength, nutrition, recovery, etc., it actually builds up your human capacity. So you actually have capacity for more. And I think that's an important fundamental shift of lens that we need to look at. I'm doing this as an essential tool to, fill my soul, give me pride, satisfaction at achieving goals. But it actually turns me into the man or woman or whatever that you want to be and need to be to perform across life. So I know that sounds very utopian and very, aspirational, but I genuinely think it's really important and true.
Oh, I think that's so well said. And I agree that that's true. The opposite of that is the injured athlete, which you encounter day to day. Sorry, not necessarily day to day, Matt, but you've encountered across your career, yourself, your own injuries, your athletes, your team's athletes, your coaching team's athletes, that is. And obviously that's my workplace. That's my day to day, working with people recovering from injury, not always identifying as athletes, but doing some sort of physical endeavor, predominantly in sports though. And you see, I often use the term, Matt, which is an extension of what you shared, but reverse engineer it. Their world shrinks, and they are, in every part of their world shrinks, from them being a parent to them being a team member of a workplace or an employer. But everything shrinks, and I identify with that myself. When I've been injured over the years, nothing is better about my output into the world. When things are going well, one of my expressions is athletics, and you feel good. You've got more capacity, as you say, to be a better, gets bandied around a lot, but a better human.
I'll add to that, because I think at Purple Patch, we have a reputation, a proud reputation of helping athletes perform. But what we're talking about here, you don't need to identify as an athlete to actually adopt some of the practices, habits, and mindsets that make athletes successful. And you can apply it to everyday people. And, we have, I think of one of my favorite Purple Patch athletes that we've ever coached, a woman called Marina, who, when she joined us, she couldn't walk up a flight of stairs. And 5 years later has lost 100 pounds, like 40 kilograms or so. She's able to start walking, to run walking, to staying healthy. She taught herself, with a bit of support, to ride a bicycle. And now she's done a triathlon. That's really amazing. But it's not about becoming a triathlete. It's about opening up capacity of life. And she's also a better leader, a better mother, and everything else that goes along with it, which is ultimately much more important than how fast you run a marathon or a half marathon or a triathlon or anything like that. So yeah, I think it's important for listeners to realize we're not talking about athletics here. We're talking about leveraging some of the proven strategies of athletics and applying it to everyday people. And if you're an athlete, you go faster. That's good. You're less injured. If you're an everyday person, you show up in all areas of life that are important to you, better equipped to handle, navigate, and thrive. And I think that's really important.
Handle, navigate, and thrive. I think we've painted the ideal scenario, an individual engaging with sport and therefore outputting better in their life, whatever that life involves. But obviously we've both encountered in our careers the athlete that does lose perspective and becomes very myopic with their sports performance at the cost of everything else in their life. I think it would be utopian of us to ignore that happens, and unfortunately that can happen quite regularly, attracting often the type of people that are attracted to endurance sporting endeavors. This is a hard question, Matt, but one that I know you're good for. What are some principles that the athlete themselves can keep in mind when it comes to the perspective of what their sports performance actually means to them in their life, which may involve being a parent, partner, worker, employer, all the different hats that we wear. Like, how do people not go over that line of gone too far?
Yes, an easy question. Thank you. No, actually, I think that it's the way that I try and help those athletes. First, success is born out of let's use a scenario of imagining that someone was coming to me for coaching. The first thing that I would really go through before we start throwing up training plans and giving them workouts or saying, let's choose the races, is first really identify the purpose. And I'll actually use a life example here. Imagine if you have a diabetic that is dependent on daily insulin, a type 2 diabetic, so nothing to do with sports here. You can say that a goal is to lose 20 kilograms, or you can say a goal is to get off insulin. Okay, that's great. But a purpose that's more powerful, that can really drive that person through the thick and thin and have them come back to, you get the person to really have purpose to say, you know what, in 10 years' time, when my kids are teenagers, I want to participate with them in sports. That's more powerful than I want to get off insulin. So you can apply the same the other way to athletics, I think, to say, why are you really doing this? What are you looking to achieve out of it? And quite often, and people will often throw things out and you can identify the classic things. And then if you keep knocking and keep knocking and keep knocking and unpeeling the onion, you can get to a really pretty raw place. And when people have an understanding of their own purpose, why they're really doing it, you're then on a place that you can have, you can set up a framework beneath or on top of that purpose. And that really helps with the smarter decision making strategy. Now, if their goal, they're really committed in a chapter of their life, the second part of it is, I really want to, let's make it up, I really want to qualify to the Hawaii Ironman. Well, that's amazing. That's a great goal, and it could be really important, and you might be willing to and able to sacrifice other elements of your life, and that's super. But then it becomes a grounding and an alignment of coach and athlete to say, how do we get there? And you paint two pictures, because the first picture that every athlete will go to is, I need to train 20 hours a week. And there's always this aspirational stuff that's not reality. See, if you paint the roadmap and you show them the paths of what you're looking to achieve, it's easier to buy in. And I usually anchor in fundamental truths. What do you need on race week? What do you need to be? You need to be really fit. You need to have great resilience. Do you need to be hormonally or functionally, systemically really healthy and vibrant? Yes. Oh, that's important. Okay, so recovery is important. Yes, it's really important. Good. And you paint the picture, and then you can help them build the context of what's the right training for them, not what the right training for their neighbor is or what they read in a magazine, but what's the right training for them within all of the other aspects of their life, so that you can create consistency. And the reason I sort of wax so long on that and talk about that is because if you create that contract and that belief up front with an athlete, that's what you come back to. That's how you course correct. And in fact, that's what coaching is setting that roadmap, buying in up front so that you're a team together. And so that's the sort of spirit, I'd say, purpose and alignment to begin.
Gosh, that's very powerful and insightful, Matt. It's not just about qualifying for Hawaii. That might be the actual goal, but you use the phrase peeling the onion, which is something I'm aware of as a sports physiotherapist in the clinic. People don't come in because they're in pain. They come in because there's something that's bothering them, and it's normally about, I always say, 3 questions deep. What's important to you about taking part in that marathon? And you might unearth that there's a mother running for her daughter who's going through leukemia. I recall that one time. She was trying to get the marathon done because they'd actually lost their daughter, and she wanted to honour her daughter through doing something arduous, and that was her thing. And I thought, wow, if I had have missed that by not just as the professional that was engaged to help at that time that patient or that athlete realize their goal and get into the start line, if I'd have missed that was the driving why, it would have been a completely different experience for both parties. So I think what I'm hearing there is it's really important to dig a bit deeper. It's not just about hitting that time, is it? It's not just about qualifying for Hawaii or whatever it may be.
Exactly. And I think it can help along the way as well, that if you understand, if you have the fundamentals of what you want the outcome to be as an athlete, it's easier to then follow the prescription as intended, because most people don't overtrain. People don't just dump training hours on top of life because they're sadomasochistic and they just drive themselves. It's because of a lack of clarity and a lack of confidence. So they're not quite sure quite often when they're following programs why they're doing what they're doing, what the intent of the execution is in actually the prescription of the workout so that they can execute it as intended. And they don't know how to self-manage. And it's a whole conversation, a rabbit hole perhaps we don't go down, but metrics are really helpful. Data is really helpful. It's fantastic. But it can also be paralyzing because it sometimes prevents athletes from actually feeling and having conversations with themselves and self-managing. They're paralyzed by the output side of stuff, and they lose the ability to self-regulate. And so I think that when someone looks for coaching in anyone, and nothing to do with Purple Pet Show, but if someone decides to get a coach in any endeavor, I think one of the fundamentally critical components is that whoever the coach or coaching program is, they really care about educating and empowering the athlete, helping them become more autonomous. I always make a joke, hopefully I can make myself irrelevant in a year. And the reason behind that is, and I'm sure it's exactly the same as you. You're not, and I'll boil it down to me just writing a workout. So I said to you throwing ice on someone. I know that your role is more than that. But I assume when you're helping someone, you're giving them tools to helpfully self-manage and avoid this black hole again. And that's a big part of it. In many ways, you're a coach. Really good practitioners are coaches as well, not just fixing issues. And I think that becomes really important. So a word to the wise for people if they are considering coaching or coaches, I would say.
Yeah, that education component, the empowerment. I think that's a trait of good coaches, good practitioners, is they want to educate. They want to see the people, the persons, the athletes, that they're working with understand the why behind the what. I mean, there's that adage, the belief in training is more important than the training itself. So how do you get belief? Well, you understand, you trust, of course, the relationship with the coach or the practitioner, but you also have some level of understanding around the why behind the what. Couldn't
agree more. And in fact, that's why I think the mark of, look, we're here together and we're on a podcast. I run a podcast, you run a podcast, so we obviously have the shared belief. But I think the other thing that's really important for the mark of a smart or good or invested practitioner or coach is a never-ending thirst for learning and growth. And I would also say sharing. And all those people that claim to have the secret fix and they don't want to share, it's like, I'll tell you what, that's run away, because normally under there is a lack of confidence or understanding in why they're doing what they're doing. So, as for me, for a coach, I can only speak for me, but I learn every day and I reach out beyond triathlon and endurance sports, and I try and glean from everyone, folks like you and many practitioners, and that makes it fun. But it also it makes you realize when you look back 10 years and you're like, wow, what I didn't know then. And so what do I not know now?
Oh, gosh, it's humbling, isn't it? It absolutely is. But I think that's also one of the characteristics of high-performing practitioners, coaches, is that humility. And it's not thinking, what's that saying? It's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking less often about yourself and realizing that there's people out there that I need to connect with that can actually impart a whole nother layer of understanding. On the education, as an example, Matt, just from my professional world, if we start working with an endurance athlete with a tendon condition, we know that typically that's going to be quite a road ahead to get that under control. So I'll often share resources, podcast blogs, and say your homework is to come back to me and let me know what you've learnt from this. Because if you don't learn and understand while we're about to do what we're going to do, this is going to be very hard for you. And in fact, it could compromise you even get into what we call your physio finish line. That education component is so key. Matt, you mentioned something that has emerged several times in recent episodes of the Physical Performance Show, and that's this idea of self-management, self-regulation of the athlete. Recently, Paul Lawson shared around the context of evolving artificial intelligence in progressively in coaching. It's just not replacing the coach, but just another tool in the toolbox. And Paul said that one of his principles is he wants the athlete to feel the session, not just blindly follow the prescription. What would Matt Dixon, what would you add to that to help the athlete be empowered? That's your word, the empowerment around feeling the session, self-regulating the session, and not just following that high-intensity interval session that is on the program that day. What are the tips that the athletes need to know to be confident to do that?
It's a great question. I think it's really, really important because if we use running with GPS pace monitors, heart rate monitors, we use bicycles with power meters, etc. That those are really useful tools in the toolbox. But if you take a session, and maybe the best example is to take a small example of a training session. The first thing that the athlete should do, and this flows from our prior little discussion, is understand what am I trying to get out of this workout? So what's the intent of it and what does proper execution look like? That's good. And then, because with that understanding, they should have a little sense of what should this feel like? What's too hard? What's too easy? So on one end of the scale, if you're building something quite foundational, a bit more base building, it should be conversational. It should be soul filling. It shouldn't be, really suppressing the system. On the other side of the high intensity intervals, are you prescribing this to me, or am I planning this session where it should take me to failure? Probably not. Or should it be an 8 out of 10 effort around? And what should be the expected outcome based on my performance variables and current training? And it might be around here. So one of the things that I'm not a fan of is prescribing specifically by a number. Go and do it. Very occasionally we do it in extreme, but in the most times. So I think there are many structured workouts that pre-program someone's rides and hold them to a fixed intensity. The problem is, and that's often based off a number that was derived from some assessment many weeks ago, maybe, on a single day, to say, this is the specific number. You're going to hold 200 watts for 6 minutes. And that's madness, because physiology is not building a bridge. It's not. It's chaotic. It's influenced, as we talked about, by lots of different stressors. And some days you might feel better than other days. Sometimes you might have accumulation of fatigue from life or prior training. So if you understand the intent, you understand what it should feel like, then you can go and execute it. And then what you have while you're executing is what I call the inner animal, what it should feel like, self-regulation. And then you have your heads-up display. And you have your pace or your power, if it's biking, running, or combination of both. And that's a measure of your output, so the work that you're doing, and that's the output. And then you have your heart rate potentially, even lactate, if people are drawing that at, razor thin edge of performance. And that's a measure of your internal cost. It's the way to think about it. So those aren't the drivers. They're the framework, they're the regulators, and they're the conversation starters. Oh, that might be a bit too much. Or is that actually appropriate for today? And it's through lesson. And I think that precision is a word I don't like. In like 200 watts, if it's 190, it's a bad day. If it's 210, you've gone too much, making it up. But that's just madness to me, because we just don't need to go there. So I begin to sum it up to make it more intent, what the exertion should be like, then measuring so that you can review afterwards and have heads-up display of external output, which is power or pace typically, and then internal cost via typically heart rate. And if you go in that order, that creates a nice framework for athletes to actually become aware. And it also diffuses that pass-fail mentality. Today was a good day because I did 210. Today was a failure because I only did 190. That's not the case. Actually, that 190 watts under fatigue or something might be a really good, valuable training day. And so it tries to limit the pass-fail mentality of a training session.
Which every athlete on the planet would have to confess that they're hopefully evolving or they've evolved, or they're still, in that mindset, but it's not binary, is it? Stephen Seiler shared an adage recently that I think is just so powerful, and that's hard is what you're good for on that day.
Exactly.
What have you? You said there at the start, Matt, and it's such a good reminder for all of us that life is life stressors. The context of life, performance in life, and then you use the phrase that physiology is not building a bridge; it's chaotic. So, therefore, we're probably going to feel different session to session, aren't we? And I really love what you just shared there about going into the session. What's the intent of that session, and what does good execution look like? I think that'd be two good reflections for every athlete to think about before they take to that next session.
I also think there's one other important thing with training, particularly for amateur athletes, time-starved, busy amateur athletes, where what is the role of training in your life? And when I look at a lot of training plans, they look like chicken soup or chicken casserole. What I mean by that is the workouts themselves might be great, but there's very little hierarchy between sessions. And every coach will say, it's really important if you want to get everything out of training, you need to be focused, you need to be present. Well, let's say someone is doing 10 hours a week of training. If I say to that athlete, every one of these sessions, you need to be present and focused, I'm basically giving them a second, like a part-time job. and it's very difficult. And so I prefer, for creating the runway towards consistency, to look at it in a slightly more nuanced way, to say, look, here are the 2 or 3 really important, tough sessions that are looking to move the performance needle, that you need to be up for, you need to be present, and to get the most out of, you've got to give yourself to them. No distractions, full focus, full present, Rocky Balboa, whatever you want to have as your inspiration, this is it. But there's only a professional athlete only does that 2, maybe 3 or 4 times a week, because otherwise it accumulates too much. Every other session is still really important. It's high value, but it's there to either prepare or recover from those sessions, or it's more about general conditioning, so lower stress endurance work, or maybe something technical. And the majority of those sessions, you actually don't have to show up quite as much. You need to have the confidence to do those easy. One of the biggest mistakes that I think athletes make is to go too hard on the easy days. Make them conversational, and we have a tagline that we call soul filling. And I look at those supporting workouts as the pressure relief valve of life. So by doing them, you don't want to be overly structured, overly focused. In fact, go on a run and go on a trail. And if you want to listen to a podcast, listen to this podcast, but whatever it is. And it's a little bit of me time. And there's this obsession around asking athletes to focus. It's like, go with your friends, go and enjoy it, have a little bit of broader range, just keep a cap on that intensity so that when you're asked to show up, the quality of that session is great and you can really manage it. It also becomes, by the way, a management tool because it can give the confidence to say, life is chaotic. I've got these interval sessions. I've got a track session planned for Wednesday. But I've got tomorrow on a Wednesday, having a crazy family day, and I've still got to work. So it'd be insane for me to get up at 4:30 and go and do a track session and just be tired doing it. Instead, you know what? That's a really important session. I'm going to shift with something more soul-filling to help energize the rest of my day and move along. And you have a little bit of dynamic mindset, because another one of our cute sayings that I always come back to is life is not a spreadsheet. So you can't have a training program that's static and rigid, because that's not what life is. And by creating that hierarchy, I think it helps athletes with confidence to go easy and adhere to the easy stuff. I said to an athlete today, so I'll just share it because it's top of mind. I said, if you order a big vacuum cleaner from Amazon, the filler around that vacuum cleaner, that little white, chips that you get in the box, is really important. It's not going to help that, the vacuum is the thing, the key workouts, but the other sessions have their role. They're the Amazon pack filler. They're really important. You can't have a great vacuum, a great athlete, without the support of those other sessions. So it's not that they're not important, but their role can actually be comes back to that capacity. They can be soul-filling, enjoyable, a bit more free. Just keep them easy. And then you're really excited when you hit the hard workouts. And it diminishes that training is a 7-day-a-week grind thing. Yeah. And a lot of the people get that because they go too hard, they don't recover enough, and every day is the same with the same priority, and it's mentally taxing as well.
Not sustainable over the long term. And you started this conversation putting emphasis on the fact that good training is consistent training, and training that's integrated into a healthy human being that has many different hats typically in life. Matt, you also don't want to gloss over it because it was such nice phraseology, but you said the inner animal and the heads-up display, they're two critical components for the athlete to help self-regulate themselves. And then there's that confidence word that you've shared a few times, the athlete having confidence to be able to self-regulate. And I assume a byproduct, and I certainly know from my own athletic journey and certainly from working with athletes over the years, that when an athlete does become more confident in self-regulating, making course corrections based on how they feel and life stressors, and Matt Dixon's 50-person party tomorrow, for example, the example you shared out, they enjoy it more. It's more liberating. It's not another job that you have to hit benchmarks around. It's more fluid than that.
I thought about a couple of my athletes that I've coached over at the more elite side of the sport as well. Like this absolutely permeates to the razor's edge when people think that professional athletes and triathletes always need to be on like this. But a couple of athletes that spring to mind was one that's a very well-known triathlete called Jesse Thomas, based in the US, but also for Australian listeners, Tim Reed, who I coached all the way through. And Tim's a wonderful athlete, a wonderful guy as well. And he won the 70.3 World Championships the year that it was in Mooloolaba in Australia. And the big thing that year, I think for him, and we had gone through a 4-year journey up to that point, but he really went through a bit of self-discovery about what was important. And he managed to strip things down to a more basic and enjoyable level. And the thing that really helped him flourish that year was being healthy, being vibrant, really enjoying his sport. And there's always a joke, because after he won the World Championship, he went on several podcasts and he said, well, what was the strategy? And he said, Matt just told me to go and have fun. And it's actually true, but there was more context behind that. Of course, it was said with purpose, and there were more words than that, I should point out. But it really was when you create consistency and you have this self-management, and it's training sessions stop becoming pass-fail, am I good or am I going backwards every single day? And if you extend that to life, imagine running a business, imagine owning a coffee shop and saying, the success of our coffee shop is how many customers came in the last hour. And if not enough came in, it's a disaster. We need to rewrite the script and everything. No, there's like you look at patterns over time. You have good days, you have bad days, you have trends that you look for. You course correct if something's not right. And over the course of time, you come up for perspective. You go up in the stands and you have a little look down and you say, what do we need to improve? Being a business owner, which ultimately athletes are. They're owning their business of their sport. It creates fun, joy, control, and ultimately performance.
Not losing sight of that, keeping it fun and enjoyable. And I think from observation, it's sometimes the beginning aspirational athlete that's perhaps more at risk of losing sight of that. Would you say that's fair, or just a bit too much of a generalization?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's sort of two ends of a horseshoe continuum at the most at risk. It's the people that are just trying to get that final push to, let's say, get on a podium, win a world championship, qualify to world championship, whatever it might be, where they're really seasoned and they're like, I need something else. And the natural tendency, interesting, people tend to add to the state of actually confusion and paralysis and detrimental performance. That's a whole other conversation. Then, as you say, I think that people just entering the sport and newer to the sport, athletically newer to the sport as well, they are really at risk. And one of the biggest challenges for those people is they often have big goals, which is great. They want to make it up. They want to finish a marathon. They want to cross the finish line of an Olympic distance or a half Ironman, whatever it might be, an Ironman. And they often don't have the background of years and years and years of sports growing up, maybe. So they haven't been coached necessarily. They haven't gone through some of the failures. They don't understand the length of the journey and the fact that it will include roadblocks, etc. And they try and get there too fast. And so they wake up, and particularly as they've seen it in movies, wake up every day and be the athlete you want to be. That's okay maybe in some habits, like, be professional and sleep as much as you can and within the context of life and try and eat well. But athletically, training-wise, it's actually not that. What it is be objective and an assassin of truth on where you're at now, and meet yourself at that point, and then build mini victories and give yourself a little bit of a longer time, because success athletically and tissue health, I would argue, and systemic health and mental health all comes off incremental, patient mini victories. You'll have some failures along the way, but if you can do that, it's joyful and enjoyment. And I'll say that it's interesting being a parent. I know you got 3 kids, and so you're in the real craziness, but they're all of an age where they're, I'm sure, getting into things that they love and maybe sports. I've got one 10-year-old. As a parent, it's really amazing, because my boy Baxter, he plays very American, but he plays baseball and he loves it. And he followed my background a little bit, at least for now. He's doing swimming. So, of course, I have to shut up and really be quiet and go and work the barbecue so that I'm not the pressure parent. But it's like, keep it really fun. Like, don't try and get him personal coaching. Don't go and have him swim 5 days a week. Like, swim a couple of days a week and improve off of that, and be with your friends and go and have fun, because it's okay. He's coming up 10 tomorrow, and then he's going to be 11 and 12, and if he wants to follow that or any other sport, he'll find his way. And it's trying to open doors of opportunity with that. But if you try and push them from behind, I don't know where we're at on this question here, so I'm sorry I'm going on my tangent of Matt Dixon's thoughts on parenting. But it's really been, I guess, you see it in kids and it's another. It's been another opportunity for me as a coach to learn from actually being a dad, interestingly. And say, hang on, this really applies to everyone's sports. Meet yourself where you're at, build little victories, and have fun on the way. And the chances are that sports performance will emerge from it.
The old adage, isn't it? We underestimate what we can achieve in across a 10-year span, but we overestimate what we'll hopefully achieve in a year. And it's just, I see that in the physiotherapy room when people have been caught in the injury boom-bust cycle. And it's like, if we can just think about seasons rather than this season, what can you achieve trying to get on top of repeat tendon injuries or repeat bone stress injuries? It's a different perspective. You use that phraseology, coming up in the stands and looking down rather than being caught in the weeds.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great perspective.
You're listening to Purple Patch Fitness founder and head coach Matt Dixon on this Coach's Corner episode 332 of the Physical Performance Show. Support for today's show comes from our upcoming live stream event brought to you by Pogo Physio and Polar, being held on the 10th of September, 3 to 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And as per usual with our live stream events, post-event recordings will be available. Now, this live stream event features Rory Darkins, former guest of the show, sharing around positive sports psychology, cultivating deep well-being. Tickets are available for $49 Australian per person, including post-event recording of the live stream and a PDF copy of the presentation. Tickets are available over at physicalperformanceshow.com. And of course, our patrons of the show will receive complimentary access. Support for today's show also comes from Polar's new generation stunning running watches, the Polar Pacer and the Polar Pacer Pro. The Polar Pacer Pro, that's the watch for those who want to run better. It's one of the most powerful and sophisticated running watches ever built. It's ultra light with a high performance core processor, including an extensive suite of advanced training tools that will help serious runners improve their running economy and performance. With built-in navigation and running power, it debuts at an incredible $499. Meanwhile, the Polar Pacer, well, that's the watch for those who want to fall in love with running. It's an ideal running watch for those who are starting their journey as runners, embodying the simplicity of running with all the essentials, plus the specialized training, sleep, and recovery tools needed to fall in love with the sport. The Polar Pacer, it helps all runners get started at $299. So if you feel like it's time to beat your best, jump across to Shop Polar over at polar.com. Check out the all-new Polar Pacer range. For now, let's jump back to the learn-ins with this week's guest, Matt Dixon, head coach and founder of Purple Patch Fitness, on this Coach's Corner episode. Matt, the pillars of performance that underpin Purple Patch, endurance, strength, nutrition and fueling, recovery. We've touched on some of the key, I guess, reminders about considering life's stressors in terms of adaptation to training, prescribing training, and we've touched on recovery loosely a few times. Nutrition and fueling, it's something that I know you're very passionate about. It's such a critical lever for not just physical performance, but also health. What mistakes, I might try and get inside your brain this way, Matt, what would you say are the top 3 mistakes you see athletes making around their nutrition and fueling?
It is an emerging science. It's evolving all the time. And so the way, from an educational standpoint, I tend to divide the big bucket of nutrition into 2 things, nutrition and fueling. So if you think about nutrition being your meals, your snacks, so your daily eating habits, and the fueling being the calories that you consume during or after a workout. I think for a consistently training athlete or someone that is consistently exercising in life, the number one, it outstrips everything else. The number one would be failing to consume calories immediately following the workout. And it has multiple roles on that, and I won't go too much into it, but there is this collision of a lot of trends and research and life hacking around intermittent fasting and reduced eating windows, and a lot of it's really interesting. But for people, you have to come out of the lab a little bit and say, let's talk about how people live their life, how they are training for something, and how they actually set up their habits around eating. And we are playing a game of stress management the whole way through. And we want to have, during our daily life, training adaptations, and we want to have energy in the day to go about our life. And very consistently, if let's say that someone is working out in the morning and you put them in deficit and you do not consume calories, a cascade of negative effect happens. Impaired recovery, impaired refueling for subsequent workouts, starvation signals that occur that tends to lead to less favorable eating choices later in the day, overconsumption, but also overconsumption of starchy carbohydrates that cause fatigue. And the athlete comes out of the stressful training with high cortisol and stress hormones. And by not consuming some protein doesn't naturally stunt those hormones. And so post-workout fueling is a really good habit we could do a whole show on that, but a really good habit, I think, for people. And it comes from anyone that is exercising consistently, and very much then becomes a critical around the catalyst for proper eating habits for an athlete as well. So that will be number one. Number two, sort of aligned to that, is for a whole host of reasons, but breakfast being the most important meal of the day. I like athletes to consume a really good breakfast. It can be post-workout if you're exercising in the morning, but that provides the energy for the day, the energy for the brain, because our brains rely on energy, stabilization, and tends to be easier for people to manage controlled eating throughout the day. And then for an endurance athlete, one thing that's a little more that maybe 5 years ago I wouldn't have said, but has said now, is the underestimating our protein needs as a high training endurance athlete. We always think about bodybuilders requiring protein and pumping themselves up, but endurance sport is a catabolic sport, and protein is a really important component. And I can't remember where I saw it, but I saw a really interesting thing from a British nutritionist that works with a lot of the sports teams in the UK, a lot of the Premiership. And he said a nice thing. Imagine you're going into the buffet, you've got a big plate. First thing you do is go and get a good source of protein. Then, depending on whether it's after a workout or not after a workout, is whether you then go and get your big starch or you go and get your veggies. And that's what you fill the plate with. And then you supplement with the reverse. So it kind of has a performance meal and a sort of more life energy meal, health meal. And the folks that we utilize a lot, in fact, there's a great Australian nutritionist, a part of a company called Fuel In. His name is Scott Tyndall. Did a lot of work in professional rugby, the America's Cup team in sailing, British rowing, a lot of the pro triathletes right now. He has a similar stoplight system for that, which I think is absolutely genius. So yeah, protein needed, breakfast being an important meal of the day, post-workout fueling.
That's Matt Dixon's 3 top tips around nutrition and fueling, which as a sports physiotherapist, it's been very encouraging to see a lot more awareness and I guess an awakening around the fueling aspect of not just performance, but health. I've heard you reference on your podcast, the relative energy deficiency in sport, diagnosis, which is a diagnosis of exclusion. And unfortunately, many athletes are not aware that they are experiencing that. So it's wonderful to hear someone like yourself, Matt, bring attention to that. And they were some very practical and applicable tips. Sorry, Matt, you're going to share something there?
Oh, well, I just what you mentioned there, that should almost be number one. And so thank you for reminding me of that, which is the vast majority of training athletes do not consume enough total calories in the day to support their training output. And I think that's so thank you, because you bring that right back to the front of my mind. That's a truth. It's very stressful for people that are training a lot, mentally and physically, to consume the amount of calories that are required to actually support their training. And I used to say something that was quite interesting. It was said, when somebody is struggling to shift their body composition for the positive, the normal thing that we have to do is get them to exercise less and eat more. Now, the reason I say that is because it goes, what? Is that, but it's actually kind of true, because most athletes are under fueling and overtraining. And so when you can get the body healthy from that standpoint, positive things happen in health, energy, body composition, and everything else. So yeah, thank you for that reminder.
No, gosh, it's such a key topic, isn't it, Matt? Matt, you've been very generous with your sharings from your accrued years of wisdom in the field. But every guest of the show gets issued 2 set questions, and the first is: if Matt Dixon could boil everything he's learnt across his exposure in this world of coaching, sports, science, into one piece of advice to help the listener of this show perform at their physical best, what would that single piece of advice be, Matt?
Embrace the journey. And so you talked about, I'll give the context behind it. I was going to say, bring your athlete to life and your life to your athlete. But embrace the journey. Everything gets better if you look long term. And goals are important, races are important. But if you really go on the journey, that means that you're integrating into your life. It's something that you do rather than something you're dumping on top of life. And when you get that, it becomes more fun and you're more successful. So I would say embrace the journey, something that you can remember.
Gosh, what a timely reminder too, Matt, around everything gets better over enough time. If you look over a long enough period of time. There's that. I remember someone saying, will it matter in 20 years? Probably not. Oh, Matt, that's beautiful. Matt, the second set question challenge is this. Every guest of the show issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. So what is Matt Dixon, Purple Patch founder, physical challenge going to be for the week?
Of all of your training that you do this week, so it's 7 days in the week. So if you are working out 7 days, make sure that 5 of your days this week are soul-filling. And see how you feel at the end of the week. And you can go as hard as you want on the other 2 days. I'd love a challenge where, and I'd love to hear what people think and how they do. 7 days in a row, 5 of those days, any activity that you love to do, you make them really soul-filling, conversational, free. Go listen to an audiobook or a podcast, just a little bit of boundary. Go and do the other sessions as hard as you want. See how you feel at the end of the week. I bet you have a pretty good performance in the 2 big sessions of the week.
That's beautiful. We'll call it the Matt Dixon 5-day Soul Filler Training Challenge or something like that. And if you do take it on, do reach out and let Matt know how you've gone with the 5-day Soul Filling Challenge. Matt, you're easily found online. You're prolific with your output. You started this conversation by saying the undergirding mission of Purple Patch Fitness is to empower and educate. You're huge on education. There's the podcast, Purple Patch Podcast. There's the publications, the books. Where else can people go to engage with yourself and your team? There's a whole team behind you.
There is a team behind us. I'm very lucky to have a great team. I think the easiest thing, we online on social media, and we can send you those links. But the easiest thing, we have an educational newsletter every week that we really try and anchor around education. And it's around performance. It's not just around triathlon. It's everything in life performance and sport. And that's just at our website, which is purplepatchfitness.com. So if you head there and scroll down, sign up for the newsletter. We're not pumping, trying to sell you on anything, but we are welcoming you to the community, and hopefully you find some of the stuff helpful, inspiring, or at least conversation starters.
Brilliant. Matt, this has been a real treat. Thank you for your time, San Fran time locally there, and we wish you all the best for tomorrow's big party, your son turning 10, but also thinking more longer term, we wish you all the best for all the great work yourself and the team are doing.
Brad, thank you very much for having me on the show, and firstly, I really enjoyed it, and I love the show, so long may it continue, and I hope that folks find this helpful, but really, thank you very much for inviting me.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show, and I trust and I know that you enjoyed Matt Dixon's sharings today. Now be sure to be following Purple Patch Fitness, all one word, over on Instagram. And if today's conversation with Matt piqued your interest around the Purple Patch Pillars of Performance, do check out Matt's prior publications, The Well-Built Triathlete and Fast Track Triathlete, available wherever books are sold. Talking about socials, do jump over and follow the show at Physical Performance Show and keep the podsies coming. That's a screenshot of the episode that you've been enjoying at any moment in time. Tag in the show at Physical Performance Show and we will reshare those. They are always a whole lot of fun. As are the ratings and reviews over on iTunes. If you've been enjoying the show and are yet to leave a review, we'd love to hear from you. Jump across to Apple Podcasts. You can find the show with full video episodes now available over also on YouTube. Just search The Physical Performance Show. And if you'd like to support production of the show practically, you can do so from just $5 per month by jumping over to physicalperformanceshow.com and simply clicking the Patreon tab. Now remember, all patrons of the show receive complimentary access to our back catalogue of live stream events, including prior live streams with Dr. Shona Halson, Rooney McGregor, and Dr. Stephen Seiler. And don't forget our upcoming live stream with Rory Darkins, scheduled for the 10th of September, Positive Sports Psychology, Cultivating Deep Wellbeing. Tickets are available over at physicalperformanceshow.com from just $49 Australian dollars. If you are an endurance athlete struggling with bone, tendon, or joint-related concerns, then Pogo Physio's online telehealth consultations can be a very effective vehicle to help get you back to your physical best. Jump over to pogophysio.com.au/telehealth. If you have feedback for myself regarding the show, you can find me easily over on the socials at Brad_beer. We are always happy for feedback on how we can improve the show. As always, a massive thanks to the team behind the show who make this show possible each and every week. Daryl Misson, our audio engineer, Susan Wilkin, show administration, Matthew Olding, graphic design, and Milan Borrow, videography. So until next week, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been The Physical Performance Show.